Good morning, and thank you for attending the Toronto Crime Stoppers Auto Theft campaign. My name is Mark Madrimutu, your host for today's event. I'm currently the detective and coordinator assigned to the Toronto Crime Stoppers program. Toronto Crime Stoppers is assigned to the Community Partnerships and Engagement Unit, which is under the leadership of Deputy Chief Lauren Pogue, Acting Staff Superintendent Don Belanger, and Acting Superintendent Anthony Paletta. The objective of today's campaign is to raise awareness about the growing impact of auto thefts within our communities, as well as deter criminality by educating and encouraging our citizens to report information about auto thefts and other forms of criminality and anonymously to Crime Stoppers or to our local police authority when required to do so. As you can see, the many guests here today exemplify the collaboration and reiterate our unified efforts being made to address public safety. I would like to take this time to recognize some of our honored guests who will be sharing a few words with you this morning. Chief of Toronto Police Service Myron Demkiw, Inspector Joseph Mattis from the Holdup Squad, Toronto Police Service, and the Chair of Toronto Crime Stoppers, Mr. Sean Sporton. As well, we'd like to recognize and thank the following partners and stakeholders for attending and showing their continued support to address public safety. Toronto Police Service Board, Toronto Police Service Command, and our service members, Toronto Police Association, Toronto Crime Stoppers Board and team, the Ontario Association of Crime Stoppers and Surrounding Crime Stoppers program, the BOLO program, members of our community and stakeholders, our policing partners, OPP Acting Chief Superintendent Mike Stoddard, and of course you, the media. At this time, I would like to introduce Toronto Chief of Police Myron Demkiw to share his remarks.
Thank you for that, Mark. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. And before I begin my remarks, I'd like to just acknowledge and thank our board of Toronto Police Service Board Executive Director, Dr. Duby Kenengesser, for being here, our policing and industry partners. Thank you so much for being here and your continued support and engagement on this very important issue. And a big thank you to Detective Mark Madrimutu, Constable Sean O'Neill, Chair of Toronto Crime Stoppers, Sean Sporton, who you'll hear from momentarily, and the entire Crime Stoppers Board of Directors. Thank you for your amazing work to help raise awareness of the impact of auto theft in our communities. In addition to raising awareness about auto theft, this campaign aims to deter would-be criminals by encouraging anonymous reporting of auto theft and other crimes to Crime Stoppers. Toronto Crime Stoppers processes over 7,000 tips and 15,000 follow-ups annually, which has assisted investigators in solving numerous cases in which community members were victimized. The value that Toronto Crime Stoppers brings to our service is immense. In 2023, anonymous tips helped solve 5 homicides, led to over 100 arrests, with over 700 charges laid. Over $800,000 worth of illegal drugs were seized. More than $5 million in recovered and seized property, including 30 illegal firearms and 42 recovered vehicles, which made up almost half of the value of all property recovered as a result of Crime Stoppers. We could not have done this without the public's assistance. Crime Stoppers helps enhance community safety by empowering members of the public to share information without fear of reprisal. As you know, auto theft has profound effects on community safety and well-being. The number of auto thefts, including carjackings and home invasion auto thefts, and the increased violence, threats, and use of weapons in the commission of these crimes continue to be a source of significant concern in Toronto, the Greater Toronto Area, and indeed across our entire country. These are not just property crimes. These crimes impact people's sense of safety, security, and have lasting impacts on families and communities touched by these violent acts. Police services, other law enforcement partners, and private sector industry stakeholders will continue working together to address this complex and very serious community safety issue. We will also continue to dedicate significant amount of resources to investigating, arresting, and prosecuting anyone involved. Public awareness campaigns like this one are just one of many ways Crime Stoppers continues to enhance community safety, and Crime Stoppers depends on the media to help raise awareness of its campaigns. I am grateful to all the media here today to support the Auto Theft Awareness Campaign. Thank you for helping us keep our communities informed and reminding the public how to contact Toronto Crime Stoppers. I encourage anyone who has information about auto theft or any criminality to please consider contacting Toronto Crime Stoppers and providing that information anonymously. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Demkiw, for those remarks. At this time, I would like to invite Inspector Joseph Mattis from the Holdup Squad to share his remarks.
Thank you, Chief Demkiw. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to the Toronto Crime Stoppers Auto Theft Campaign. On June 25th, 2024, Deputy Johnson stood here with representatives from the OPP, the Halton Regional Police, York Regional Police, and the Durham Regional Police to discuss the results of the Provincial Carjacking Task Force and Project Titanium. Provincial Carjacking Task Force was formed in September of 2023 to address rising incidents of violence related to auto crimes. The end of the task force does not mean an end to our commitment to the citizens of this city or to the people of Toronto. Chief Demkiw has listened to the concerns of the residents of Toronto and has given the Holdup Squad the necessary resources to respond. The Holdup Squad now has the ability to provide a robust response to these victims of these auto crimes. Of the 378 occurrences investigated by the task force, 275 of them occurred right here in Toronto, where residents of Toronto were victimized. That's 73% of all occurrences happened right here. Although these crimes are being committed in Toronto, the accused are being recruited from across the GTA, the province of Ontario, and neighboring Quebec. We have to think about automobiles and automobile-related crimes such as carjackings, home invasions, and break-and-enters as commodity robberies, similar to jewelry, currency, or pharmaceutical drugs. Criminals have found a new commodity to steal: cars. We have to work collaboratively with our police partners, external partners, victims of crime, and the community to address this issue. The partnerships with other police organizations and external partner agencies resulting from the task force still exist, just in a different form. As demonstrated here today, we are constantly sharing information with our many partners. The Holdup Squad is instituting a new method to track and identify all auto-related issues within the City of Toronto. It's called the Central Auto Intake Model. This is modeled after a proven intake model developed by one of the service's own who created the Central Fraud Intake Model. All auto crimes will now be routed, triaged, and examined for similarities and trends by members of the Holdup Squad. This will include contacting every victim, providing information, prevention tips, and an offer of victim services. Sometimes the vehicle taken has a direct impact on this person's livelihood. Perhaps they use it for work, how to get to work, or even to pick up a child or partner. Toronto Police Service understands this and is working with a dedicated group of Crowns working to prosecute these matters to ensure these concerns are understood by the judiciary. In 2023, the Toronto Police Service had 11,951 stolen autos, not including 425 for carjacking, home invasion, and break-and-enters. Whether it's robberies, carjackings, home invasion, or auto thefts, criminals are after a valuable commodity. Working together with residents, law enforcement, and industry partners, we can make it harder for criminals to victimize communities and ultimately make a safer and more secure Toronto. I'd like to thank Toronto Crime Stoppers for this event and Sean Sporton for their support, along with all our other partners that are in the room today. Thank you.
Thank you, Inspector Mattis, for those remarks. I would like now to invite the Chair of Toronto Crime Stoppers, Mr. Sean Sporton, to hear a few words.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Chief Demkiw, Inspector Mattis. Thank you to the media for attending today. Auto theft is more than just a crime. It's a violation of our safety and peace of mind. Every stolen vehicle represents a potential threat to public safety and brings about disruptions that go beyond a financial loss. It disrupts lives and weakens our community's safety. We must recognize the power of community in combating this issue. Toronto Crime Stoppers operates on the principle that everyone can play a role in crime prevention and community well-being. That's why today, Toronto Crime Stoppers is launching this public awareness campaign designed to bring attention to the growing impact of auto theft and its impact it is having on our communities. The focus of the initiative is straightforward: to raise awareness about this issue, and most importantly, to remind citizens that they can anonymously relay information about these crimes and those who engage in them to Toronto Crime Stoppers at 416-222-8477 or submitting a tip online at 222tips.com. Anonymously saying something to Toronto Crime Stoppers about an auto theft crime not only keeps our community safe, but it could also save someone's life. We should all feel empowered to stand up for what is right, even when it's difficult. This is how we break the code of silence. In addition to this awareness campaign, today, Toronto Crime Stoppers is announcing an enhanced cash reward of up to $5,000 for any information that can assist investigators from the Toronto Police Service in identifying and arresting those responsible for auto thefts that occur in the City of Toronto. This enhanced cash reward will only be valid until Monday, September 30th, 2024. So if you have something to say it now, and by doing so, you'll be making your community a safer place. Through the collaboration of strategic campaigns like this, Toronto Crime Stoppers, industry stakeholders, along with our law enforcement partners, will continue to make a difference in the prevention of crime in our communities. Recognizing this crime extends beyond our city, Toronto Crime Stoppers has designed the campaign to be adaptable by any Crime Stoppers program across Canada and police services across Canada if they are interested. We will continue to fight auto theft and working with the community as they remain anonymous. I will conclude by reminding everyone that community safety truly is a shared responsibility. When as a community we remain silent, we are all victims. Let's choose a difficult right over the easy wrong, to speak up, and by doing so, it will support this year's theme of your city, your safety, your call. Toronto Crime Stoppers remains committed in our continued efforts to mobilize the community to see it, say it, stop it for a safer Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Sporton. At this time, we'd like to thank Toronto Chief of Police Myron Demkiw, Inspector Joseph Mattis, and Sean Sporton, and all of you for attending today's media launch. We value the time of our honored guests and open the floor to any questions you may have. To assist with that process, Laura does have a microphone that she can bring around if there are any questions at that time, and please keep your questions themed to today's launch.
Hi, a question for Inspector Mattis, Erica Natividad, City News. I'm just wondering if you can tell us what the current response times are if a resident calls in for their car being stolen. How quickly are police responding to them?
So thank you for that question. Right now, we are reporting publicly our response times as it relates to priority 1 calls. So to the extent that a carjacking or a home invasion is a priority 1 call, we're just around 17 minutes average response time for all our priority 1 calls. When we dig deeper into that data, we try very hard to triage our response as things come in through communications, but that is our average response time for priority 1 calls.
Priority 1, and so for an auto theft, if it's not a priority 1 call, how?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that the context of the call will determine whether it's a priority 1. So a theft that occurred some time ago and is discovered many hours or sometimes in some cases days after will not rise to a top priority in our tiered response or our triaging. But a carjacking out on the street involving certain circumstances will potentially be a priority 1 call.
And can you tell us how big the resources are now, how big the team is dedicated to specifically auto thefts and carjackings?
for that question. What I'll say about that is I can't elaborate on the specifics for it because I don't want to get out too much, but what I can tell you is that the resources are appropriate. We have examined the successes of the Provincial Carjacking Task Force, what other services have done, and what we have done in the past, and we've built on those successes to determine what was necessary in order to respond to this.
The $5,000, can you talk about where, anyone can answer this, where the money is coming from, who's funding it, what pot does it come from, and what kind of information, like how often do these tips actually get approved, like how often does this money actually go out, like what have you budgeted, you know, give us the lay of the land here.
Yeah, good question. So the $5,000 is up to $5,000. It comes from Toronto Crime Stoppers and the fundraising initiatives that we do. So it is very centric to Toronto Crime Stoppers. Every month, the Crime Stoppers Board meets and discusses the tips that come in. You know, outside of the enhanced reward, we don't pay tipsters anymore, right? So for these types of things that we do an enhanced reward where we offer that cash, the board will sit, we'll discuss, we'll work with our law enforcement partners to determine the facts that are presented in the tip, and we'll put a value to it. So it could be a $5,000 tip depending on what the outcome was. It could be a $500 tip. So depending on what information is coming in and we look at it, we'll determine the value of that tip.
How much do you usually hand out every year for tips?
So back in 2021, Toronto Crime Stoppers removed paying out individual tips to tipsters. However, we do have an enhanced reward program, our partners with the BOLO program and our organizations like that. So we're not actually funding those tips. Those tips are coming in through that resource. To give you a value of the tips that we hand out from the enhanced program, we run the risk of identifying a tipster because of the value of those tips. So we can't really put a value to what we've handed out. We can just say that we've handed out substantial amount of money.
What is substantial, $1,000 or $100,000? That's very subjective.
It is. Again, right, when you look at the BOLO program and the tips and the values that are being put to Canada's Most Wanted, if I were to give you an exact number, it could identify some of those individuals that were apprehended in the tips that were assigned to them.
Yeah, hi, thanks for taking my question. The carjackings and your car thefts, are you noticing that a lot of this is organized crime, or is this just kids out stealing cars? And can you speak about repeat offenders? Are you noticing a trend in people that are out on bails committing these offenses over and over again? And how frustrating can that be as a law enforcement manager?
So that's a great question. You know, we do know that organized criminality is behind a lot of these activities as it relates to the theft of vehicles generally, and carjackings is, you know, a methodology of stealing vehicles. We know it's fueling organized crime. We know it's, you know, in many instances directed by organized crime. We also know that when we had the Provincial Carjacking Task Force, for example, that upwards of 30% of offenders were young offenders. That's a growing concern. You heard us talk about gun violence in the last few weeks, about a rise of concern on young people involved in gun violence. So we're very much keeping a close eye on the age of offenders. And the facts are that we know this through some of our gun crime investigations, that organized criminality engaging young people is something that we're aware of and very concerned about. And what was the second half of your question? So I don't have the stats in front of me, but we definitely are concerned about recidivism, and we're paying attention to that. There is recidivism. Yes, there is. There are people who are out on more than one bail, and there are repeat violent offenders who are out on bail that we're very much concerned about and paying attention to, and drilling down, making sure that we understand it, that our response and our prosecution packages tell a complete picture to the presiding judge or justice.
Hi, good morning. James Bolnoff, CBC News. So I just wanted to build off of the time span for the enhanced cash reward. Is there a specific instance or investigation that TPS and Crime Stoppers are working towards with that time span? Or is it in general to gauge people's thoughts?
No, there's really no outcome of why we put that time span. Basically, we're saying it, you know, giving it a time date of when it expires because we want people to come forward now. right? We want the information. We want to be able to give that information to our law enforcement partners so they can act on it. Then it also prevents the extension, if you will, of, when we talk about 3, 4, 5 months from now, people are going to forget what we talked about here today. But they will remember the next 30 days, and we put a time limit on that for that reason.
Just a follow-up question for the chief or inspector. You mentioned you're triaging and it goes by priority. Are there any challenges in responding to the volume of calls in terms of the resources that you have dedicated to it now, even though it's enhanced?
I'll start off with addressing that in two sort of different ways. So yes, there is a high degree of volume, and that's one of the things I discussed earlier, that we looked at the volume of calls that were coming in that were different from before and how the Provincial Carjacking Task Force responded to those. But we can see that it is working based on the resources we've been given. If we look at the difference between 2023 and 2024, auto thefts are down 20%, home invasions are down 25%, arrests are up from 231 to 267 for the year. Carjackings are up, though. So although we've seen notable decreases in other areas, carjackings are up. But I think that we do have the appropriate resources to respond. And if there was a second part to your question?
I take the opportunity to elaborate just a little further, because we are talking about resourcing a police service. This is one particular set of concerns we have, but of course we're a big organization serving a very significant city with very unique dynamics in our city that are dissimilar from many other places in this country. And I think the one thing I'll highlight is in the coming weeks you will hear about our multi-year hiring plan as we present that to our police service board. And I think it's important to highlight the need to have a discussion around resourcing an organization of our size, given the unique complexities of the City of Toronto, to make sure that we can be nimble and dynamic enough to respond to the concerns of our residents as they evolve. In the last 2-3 years, we've seen a dynamic rise in carjackings, home invasions for car keys, and theft of autos. We have seen shootings rise this year to significant levels, and we're seeing younger and younger people involved. We, of course, are dealing with the effects of geopolitical events in our city that continue to impact our city on a regular basis. All of that to say that, importantly, today we're talking about vehicles, auto thefts, carjackings, and home invasions for vehicle theft purposes. But when you ask about resourcing, it is a much more complicated bit of work, and ensuring that we are resourced effectively is part of our desired outcome from presenting a multi-year hiring plan that you'll hear about at our next Police Service Board meeting.
Chief, sorry to go off topic here very quickly. My team is hoping you can talk about one important other issue in the city today, and that is the changes announced by the province to safe injection sites. Will it improve safety across the city? What do you make of what you've learned so far?
Well, I'm going to wait and see the details. It is something that's obviously needing examination by us, and we'll take it under consideration and make sure that we are looking at all the different impacts that these announcements have, and that our response is appropriate to those announcements and the impacts of them.
I just had a follow-up on that. So the province is set to announce restrictions on supervised consumption sites. Do you support having more restrictions given the Leslieville shooting that took the life of Carolina Hubner-Muckrat?
Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment at this juncture. I've not had an opportunity to review the details of the announcements. I think what's important for people to know is that we work very closely with our public health partners and other stakeholders, including our provincial partners, to ensure that our response to the opioid impact of the opioid crisis in our city is as robust as it can be.
Thank you. That'll be our final question. Our guests are available for independent interviews at this time. Thank you all for coming this morning. And if I could have just the command and our guest, we are going to do